Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final day of the Candidates 2021 chess tournament. 8 players, 14 rounds. About a year separated the first and second half. At the end of the 13th round, we were made aware of who was going to challenge Magnus Carlsen ultimately later this year for the World Championship in Dubai. Well, I had to make this video to honor the rest of the players because obviously there's still one more game to go. So we are going to go through all the games just like usual, and then we will address everybody's rating after the tournament, the biggest stories, and I will preview the match. So bear with me, and let's celebrate the candidates in style. The first game of the day is Fabiano Caruana versus Alexander Grischuk. This one begins with a Sicilian defense, nothing crazy. Knight f3, e6. And Grischuk goes for the 4 knights or the 2 knights Sicilian, whichever one you would like to call it. There are 4 knights, but normally it's 2 knights for black. Fabiano plays a move that was seen earlier. And something that he did very similar in this position, a3 and queen d3 against Anish. He plays queen d3. A move that is played like 0.05% of the time. Something astronomically low, and already after d5, ed5 in this position, we have no games ever. So that's kind of fun. And the players are basically completely on their own. And if Grischuk is completely on his own, it means he's going to have basically no time. So Fabiano develops his bishop to g5. Grischuk responds by pinning this knight. And there's obviously some congestion. Fabiano develops his bishop. Grischuk develops his bishop and covers this diagonal from any of these 3 pieces, maybe 4 pieces. We have castles, and here Grischuk takes, and plays rook c8. This position actually looks really good for black. Optically, I mean, this just looks like a big weakness. Queen b3. And the problem for black is that you also have open lines. So, for example, if you were just to play rook takes c3, I would play queen b7, and it's actually not clear who has more weaknesses, because I'm going to go a4, a5, and then ultimately make a queen. So Grischuk turns this into a queenless middle game, plays knight to b6 so as to not damage those pawns, but ends up damaging those pawns instead. And Fabiano here plays this move a4. Now, moves like a4 are very useful against knights that are in the way of your pawn. Like if there's a knight on b6, a4, a5, h4, h5 to target a knight on g6, and the same goes for the other side. Important to point out here that this pawn is most certainly not hanging, even though it would be protected, because of knight to b5, which disconnects the bishop from the knight and allows knight to d6, and that's just bad news. So Grischuk goes for this position, and a couple of moves later, we get this trade as well. And now knight goes back to c8 to guard this pawn, and I think Grischuk would like to, at some moment, play b6 to guard and then move his knight. Now Fabiano starts to improve on this side of the board. First he activates his rooks, maybe he's going to double up, maybe he's going to try to advance his pawns. f5, g3, always good to give a little bit of breathing room for your king. King f6, f3, to try to maybe run the king this way a little bit. Rook d8, rook d4. Trying to undouble. That's the idea. So if rook takes d4, cd4, it's a big improvement for white. Helping you undouble your pawn structure. Keep that in mind, and then white would just take space and be very happy. So of course Grischuk doesn't want to make Fabiano very happy. He plays rook d7, king f2, b6, and now knight e7. And Grischuk has concluded his plan. You see, when you have knight versus bishop, you need to make sure the enemy bishop is kept at bay, and also that your weaknesses cannot be targeted. Since the only real weakness in Grischuk's position is either a dark squared pawn or a light squared pawn that is so far in the back that the bishop has no way to get to it, the bishop is not very useful. And Fabiano can make moves like rook h4, but just king g7. I mean, there is really not too much. So Fabi plays f4, allows this check and comes back, and his intention now is going to be to kick the knight out of the middle with the move c4. And now c3, because again, he would like to undouble. That would be a big improvement for his position. Grischuk just doesn't let that happen. And just finally, look at that. Look at this knight jump. Gets this knight planted on c5. And for the remaining, part of the game, we kind of have like little pawn breaks. We have g4, he takes. Grischuk undoubles and plays rook e8. Grischuk has to sit and wait, because Fabiano's pawn structure doesn't allow for a lot of pawn play. His 3 queenside pawns are completely shut down. And let this be a lesson for many of you wondering how to make progress in any given position. I fast forwarded to move 40 because now the players got their extra time. This is now move 41 for Fabiano. It's really hard to play in a position where you don't have pawn play. Everything is protected, everything is guarded. If you somehow find a way to get to h6, I'm simply going to defend it, And here we have Fabi try one last thing, which is f5. It's a very good move. Fabi has the pawn play over here, and pawn takes, for example, would be not great because bishop gets activated, rook will come to the g file, and actually black's king just sucks, is the objective evaluation, like the professional evaluation there. That king is terrible. So instead, he tries to keep it a bit more closed by playing e5. And, you know, Fabi continues to try to add some layers of pressure. But as you can see, not too much is happening. Fabiano decides to chug this pawn, is essentially what Fabi does. Like, he allows Grischuk to take this because he wanted to get to e6. Grischuk chooses to sack the e-pawn and then go here with the intention to trade. That ultimately happens, and credit to Grischuk because, as you can see from the remaining moves, he was basically never in that much danger. Fabiano, and again, the constant threat of a rook trade and awareness that you can get to a king and pawn endgame, that's simply just a draw, is how we ultimately end the game. We have some pawn simplification. This pawn's not going anywhere. We have takes, the pawns are doubled, and in this position, the players agree to a draw because these b pawns scare nobody. This f pawn also scares nobody, but at least they can move forward, and a draw agreed. Not a bad game for an appetizer. Not terribly exciting, you know, but if you stuck around 6 minutes into the video and you're not yet bored, prepare to be tantalized. It's going to be great. So, MVL versus Wang Hao. E4, E5, and we have a Ruy Lopez. Not just a Ruy Lopez, we have what's known as a Berlin. D4 takes. Berlin, one of the best characters in Casa de Papel, by the way. Is it Casa del Papel or de Papel? I'm always not sure the way you're supposed to pronounce. But hey, listen. Estudié español en la escuela por 7 años, but that was so long ago that I don't have, you know, a person con quien puedo practicar. Anyway, takes, h3, king e8, knight c3, h5. All mainline stuff, like all Berlin. This has been seen before. Berlin Wall, all been seen before. Now we start going into the rabbit hole, like, is MVL gonna play rook d1, and where's he gonna move his knight, and what's he gonna do with the bishop? He plays knight e2, which again, to the untrained eye, just looks like, what are you doing? Well, the knight's never going this way, right? Because the pawn, so, then he plays bishop g5. Okay, then he plays knight back to c3. He played knight back to c3 because the pawn is gone. Now, maybe Wang Hao will play c6 in this position. But just making your opponent make pawn moves is already good for you. I know that might sound crazy because for the average like 750 rated player that's watching one of these videos, it's like, bro, he has all his pieces on move 13. Like, that should be an accomplishment. For them, there's a slightly different standard of excellence. You know, for me, I don't even enter these positions. When they play the Berlin, you know, I'm an IM. When they play the Berlin, I'm just like, it's like watching, you know, a seal get fed at the zoo. I'm just like, okay, whatever. I don't understand it, but it's interesting to watch. And we get takes. Like MVL voluntarily takes this damaging to his structure. Why? Because he's got a lot of activity. He's got a very active knight. He's got a very active rook. He's got, you know, laser beaming stuff here. And Wang Hao can only play bishop to e7. So he plays bishop e7, the knight comes. And now the undoubling. Remember from last game, the undoubling? It's move 18. Slightly unpleasant position as this knight comes in, but Wang Hao very calmly just plays the move king to e6 and rook d3. So this knight, why is it not getting taken? It could get taken. In fact, maybe it should have been taken. It wasn't taken. But, you know, the pawn comes, and then maybe you bring the rook or the rook there, and now your king's like the most like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, you know... It's like those videos where, you know, unhealthy and very aggressive people try to attack the camera person recording them, say something terrible on camera, you know, like one of those videos. We all love those videos. Hey, you want to fight, and then they like fall on their face. Yeah, that's kind of what the king is doing here. Like, that should not be happening. So rook d8 was played, so he didn't take though. And now rook e1, and now really taking is just terrible because again, you're just in the line of sight of my rook. So this very nice move locks in this knight forever. Wang Hao probably should have taken it when he had the chance. Plays a5 and f4. So now holding together that structure. Pawn to c4, trying to get you to come back and take, which would be nice because after bang, bang, the knight comes to d4, the rook comes to d8. You are threatening a fork, which is nice, and your position is actually pretty good. He just goes back to d1. This again forces Wang Hao to kind of commit to this side of the board. And in the Berlin, one thing that's, you know, you're not supposed to wave your pawns forward like this because king f2, a4, a3, suddenly your pawns are completely immobile. Like, none of them can move. Not a single one. They're all going to be lost if you move them. So, king, you know, he goes g6, king f3, knight g7, and this position's already starting to get very, very unpleasant. Rook d2 to try to double. Knight goes back to e8. And rook d1, knight c7. And in this position, there's just a very nice tactic. White to play and win. Feel free to pause. I'm going to take a sip of my Sprite. I very rarely drink soda on stream, but I had a craving today, and you only live once, you know? So it's okay to satisfy your cravings every now and then. That move, ladies and gentlemen, checks, captures, attacks. Always look at the most forcing moves first. Knight takes b5. You have no checks in this position. That makes sense. f5 is the only one, just pawn takes. And by the way, even then, probably this knight b5 works, but capture, knight b5. And the idea is that if this is taken, you take the rook. So if they take the rook, Zwischenzug. Knight takes c7 check. King here, takes, and this is a lost endgame because these pawns are atrocious. Bang, bang. I will take this, make 3 knights, and then beat you. And Wang Hao resigned after knight takes b5. And it's crazy because Wang Hao lost his last 3 games. And before we take a look at our next game, Wang Hao actually retired from professional chess. You know, chess players aren't very good at the whole press conference kind of thing. So he wasn't like, all right, I'm retiring. You know, he kind of said that he thinks he's going to step away. He's got health issues that he has to take care of, and I can't imagine the degree of stress that he's under. And, you know, Nepo in the press conference said he only slept a few hours every night. Hikaru has famously said that the Candidates was the most stressful tournament and experience of his life, so, you know, sometimes we take these guys just at their chess, like, face value. We're like, oh, he's struggling, he resigned too early. But we gotta understand that at the end of the day, they're all people, and just because they play these pieces to these squares better than we do, they're not robots. They're not emotionless. They might be very good at chess, but everybody has their struggles. You and I have our struggles. Everybody has their struggles. And, you know, I wish Wang Hao all the best. The entire chess world wishes him all the best. And he's only 31 years old, so he can work on that chess school in Chengdu, I believe that he has with Wang Yue. And all the best to him. But he did end the tournament with 3 losses. And obviously, as a competitor, you know, that fighting spirit in you kind of wants to live on. For the last 2 games, we're going to look at Anish Giri versus Kirill Alekseenko. Anish obviously coming off of an unfortunate result yesterday, losing with black to Grischuk in kind of the running for the first place. Didn't play his best game, chose an opening that he said he wasn't comfortable with, and just didn't play great, is what he said. Now this one was kind of a Catalan, so we got g3. You know, he went back to d4. Nepo played this against Alekseenko, and Alekseenko took, and that was the game that Alekseenko didn't play all that well. But Anish goes back to a Catalan, knight d2, trying to get the knight for bishop trade. We waited a very long time for that knight for bishop trade. It never really happened. I mean, Anish never played a3, so the bishop just stood there, and it just kept standing there as they developed, and it kept standing there, and now queen b1 is an interesting move, just getting out of the way of the rook. But these positions are pretty balanced, quite equal, take a lot of, you know, experience to play. Anish takes on c5, which is just, you know, how rare is it in chess that 5 pieces can recapture a square? Kirill Alekseenko takes with the knight. Now we get this, and then a little bit of a furthermore simplification. And let's just get to this position. So, completely symmetrical pawn structure, in the sense that it's 4-4 and 2-2. I understand there's some, you know, bumps. Whose pieces are better? I mean, probably Alekseenko. I mean, I'm inclined to say that these 3 pieces and this queen are just a little bit better than what Anish has going on. But objectively speaking, the position is probably completely equal. Alekseenko plays b5. That move has 2 purposes. Take away c4 and always bring the bishop back. Anish just brings the knight back to activate the bishop and threaten to take on f6. Alekseenko seems not to care about that at all. And after bishop takes d2, bishop f6, we get this position. And, you know, on paper, you would think, that white is better, like a little bit better, because the structure is just bad. I mean, this is just a weak pawn structure, right? And then you can play a move like knight f3, queen b2, and put some pressure. But as I've explained in some of my videos, sometimes it's not so simple. Sometimes having this static advantage doesn't mean much because black has dynamics. Black has, for example, the opportunity to utilize this kind of weird imbalance to kind of take away squares from your pieces, to transfer knight behind pawn and fight for the center. active lines, the more damage of a structure you have, or the more time your opponent took to damage your structure and shuffle their pieces, they fell behind in other elements of the game. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Does it make sense? I hope it makes sense. Moving on. Knight e4. Takes, queen b2. And let's also not forget that Alekseenko's playing with the black pieces. Alekseenko, I believe, is 7th or 8th place, maybe 9th place in the event. Giri's coming off, you know, this crazy run. There's some more dynamics at play here between the opponents. For a guy like Giri, you either pick yourself back up after that massive adrenaline dump of not qualifying and overcome, or you don't recover. And that's just that we're just human, you know? I'm more in the second camp. If everything that I worked for fell apart in round 13, I would really struggle to come back. I had that happen in a tournament. In the 8th round, if I won, I would have gotten an international master norm. If I drew, I would have kept in the running, but I lost a game where I was a lot better, and I just fell apart. I mean, for the 9th round, I almost lost like a complete idiot, but I drew like a complete idiot, but I didn't lose the game. So, you know, Alekseenko's just taking what Anish gives him, and he's just trying to outplay the man and play this kind of more or less balanced position. But as the game starts progressing, you start realizing that actually black has a lot of space. Anish puts his rook on the open file, but the queen is centralized. And now, you know, the next phase of the game is going to be maybe trade a queen, infiltrate with the rook when it's possible, and beat up the weak pawns. So we have rook d7. Now, if Anish just literally wants to spend the rest of the game playing king to g2 and king to g1, he can. And by the way, he literally did. King g2, king g1. But Alekseenko sensed something here. Like, you see Anish is just repeating. And Alekseenko plays rook d6. And on king g2, he plays the only move to give him anything, and that's knight to d2. Alekseenko sensed that Anish Giri was basically done. That he was done. And this was his chance. And so he jumps in, utilizing Anish's shuffling against him. Rook to d1. And now the knight transfers to c4. We have a trade. So the rooks are off. Queen d3, knight back to c4, and e4, and queen c6. Still the position, if you plug it into a machine at slightly like depth, like 30, 35, is saying, okay, white can just play like king g1, h3, king f1, king g2. But Anish Giri here plays g4, which is a move. It's a very big decision to push a pawn like this. You shut down some f5 tricks. So for example, I mean, I don't know if like queen e2, I guess f5. Well, no, queen e2 is idiotic. So I'm trying to just like, let's say h3, okay? I guess there was something in here with maybe some f5 lines potentially, like takes, knight e5. I don't know, because when I look at this, I don't know. But I guess Anish maybe thought that he could attack here somehow, and he played g4, and there's just an immediate weakness on f4. And then Alekseenko just brings in and solidifies everything on the dark squares. This is the 40th move. Now Anish plays f4, sacrifices the g4 pawn, and is just losing. And like we get this position, and again it looks like Alekseenko doesn't have a lot of movement because of this pin, but he just gives a couple of checks, and Anish has to ultimately block, because if Anish plays, for example, king c1, queen e4, and you can't guard both of these things. So he has to block, and Alekseenko gets in, and Alekseenko hunts down our man's king. Like this king, again, it's that person in that video trying to start a fight. That king should not be starting any fights. And it's over. And on knight g3, Anish resigned, because if he goes here, it's f5 mate. So he would have had to sack his queen, and Alekseenko's a good player. I think he would win this position against Anish. So disappointing finish to the candidates for Anish. But again, I can't fault the man. I mean, he's only human. You know, it's kind of a shame they even have to play the last round, if I'm being completely honest. But speaking of the last round, we've got Nepo, who is the winner of the candidates, and Liren, who is winning 2 games in a row so far. He won games 12 and 13. Let's see if this one will be a peaceful resolution. We have, okay, Nepo goes back to something he knows a lot. And Ding plays f3, which is an anti-Grunfeld, anti-King's Indian. And the point is that, you know, you want to meet, like, the guy with this. And the reason why their knight c3 is not played is because d5 will happen, and now you're just in a Grunfeld. Whereas, if they play this against you like this, bang, bang, e4. And so this is very much still kind of in style of Grunfeld, but also very different at the same time, because black doesn't get a lot of the normal standard exchanges on c3, because the knight has already been kicked out. So Nepo plays e6, which just looks hilarious, and now the players push a bunch of pawns and get this structure, and now they start developing their pieces, because they know kids are watching. Takes, knight d7, knight c3. Wait, what? Okay, whatever. a6, what does the guy want when he plays a6? Just to play b5. How do you stop b5? Of course, a4. So, knight to h5. You can't accomplish something on one side of the board, go the other way. Queen h4 is on the way. Short castle, bishop d4, check, king h1. And now we're very close, actually. Like, for example, if Nepo had played queen h4 here, knight g3 is mate because of this pin. So Nepo might have been a move or two away from checkmating Ding Liren. That sounds like it's a big deal. It's not really. Nepo did do all of this. But this is a very important move by Ding Liren. The intention is to just get rid of this bishop, and he does. And here, Nepo plays this move instead. Now there are two hanging knights, queen d3, knight to g3 check, king here, takes the rook. And if we get this, then this knight is going to get captured. So, what do you think Ding did? Man moved this knight. Now this knight is trapped. Sort of. It can take. But now it's trapped. Now both these pieces are stuck. The rest of Nepo's pieces are on the back rank. So here Ding Liren begins to play the top engine moves. He plays queen e3 with the intended purpose of trading the queen, because again, it's Nepo's only active piece. If he trades the queen and wins the knight, Nepo's got a bunch of pieces asleep in their bunkers. Then he will use the dark squared bishop to target the d6 pawn and the c5 pawn, because these pawns are very weak. And the good thing also is he has connect 4, so somewhere Eric Rosen is squealing in delight, and at the same time they're counteracting this bishop completely. Now, queen g5. This forces Nepo to finally sacrifice the knight and plant the queen here, but bishop f4 sacrificing this pawn, and the knight and knight d2, and the queen is just stuck. Like, the queen's just stuck. If you play, for example, queen to d3, looks like you've accomplished something, right? Looks like it. I mean, my knight's hanging, but what's worth more than a knight? You and also the black king. And here a very nice move. Boop! If takes this, bye-bye. Game over. You lose. It's just mate. Can't stop it. Which is why having those kind of color complex weaknesses near your king is very scary. Always be careful of a queen and a bishop kind of doing these nasty things to you. So we get this, and now with Desperado, he's going to lose his queen anyway. So how will he lose it? By sacrificing it for check, with getting a pawn. Takes here, and this. And now we have an endgame. And the balance of material in this endgame is 2 horses for rook and 2 pawns. Now that would be very nice for the guy that had the rook and 2 pawns. If 1, the rooks were active, and 2... I just went straight up to... I added 2 to 1, so it was 3. But 1 and 2, if the rooks were active and the pawns could go anywhere. And neither of those things is possible. So, also this move was played. And that move just is odd. Because after this, I don't really know where the bishop is going. Because now you just lose d6. Then this happens, and then the bishop goes here to make way for the pawn. And, well... Ding just went and attacked, guarded his bishop, took this, threatens d7, so the king has to go there. Knight c4. And Ding beat Nepo in this game. Like, this was like some titled Tuesday Blitz game. It was, and Nepo himself actually said afterward that he really, like, he also had a massive adrenaline dump. And he also didn't want to play today. I mean, how are you going to concentrate? Like, you know, so... But it's interesting. Ding Liren wins his last 3 games. Wang Hao loses his last 3 games. I mean, it's just the, you know, different stories of the event. Let me just show you and give you an update of what this means. So first things first, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final standing of your candidates. Nepo winning with 8.5 points out of 14. MVL sneaking up to 2nd place, ultimately 2-way tie for 3rd, and then the rest, obviously, Alekseenko and Wang Hao struggling throughout the event. Nice to see Ding there catch up, 0.5 point out of 3rd place, 1 point out of 2nd. That is the conclusion. I have one more thing for you, of course, which is the ratings, the live ratings. So these are your live elos. There was a moment Nepo was number 3 in the world, and if Nepo had beaten Ding Liren, he would have been 2,800 for the first time in his life, but he lost. So Ding Liren keeps that number 3 in the world in classical chess. Nepo is 4th. Giri is 6th. Giri was 5th, I think, before he lost. Or maybe not. Maybe Giri was always 6th. No, I think Giri, before losing to Alekseenko, Giri was number 5 in the world. And obviously, like, Alekseenko, I believe, is slightly lower than that, maybe 30th, 35th. But he was the Soviet wildcard. Now, let us preview the match in November. First things first. Nepo's first. So Jan Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen are both 30 years old. And they're both born in 1990. They've competed against each other in World Youth events. The first time they played each other was the World Under 12 like championship or something. And here's a picture of that. So this is all, different photos that are being shared now. Obviously, that's Nepo on the right side, Magnus next to him, and David Howell next to Magnus, massive as always. So this is a fun picture. And then Tanya Sachdev shared this on social media, which is the first photo that Jan ever posted on Instagram was November 24th, 2014. And 7 years later, November 24th, 2021, they are going to play their first game of the World Championship in Dubai. I might go to Dubai, we'll see. Obviously, the world will be a lot more open in November, but we will see. I mean, ultimately, it's a 2-week-long, 3-week-long event, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And last but not least, it's important to talk about, and I'll go full screen for this for dramatic effect. It's important to talk about something. This is an intriguing matchup for a lot of reasons, but Nepo has a very good record against Magnus Carlsen. 4 wins, 1 loss, and 6 draws in classical chess. Now, if you go to chessgames.com, you can see their kind of breakdown. They've played a lot in 2020 in these online events. Magnus Carlsen got his first win in classical over Nepo in the Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb, Croatia in 2019. First ever. But Nepo did beat him a lot, like, over the years, like 2017, 2016, maybe even earlier. They haven't played a classical game since 2019. I mean, they've maybe played, like, a total of, as you can see, 11 in the course of their career. That is crazy. So, while I do think the record is interesting, I think it basically means nothing. I don't think that there's going to be any hangover effect for the match. What is interesting about this match is Nepo's unpredictability. His momentum, his ability to play on momentum. He has very much that style. Nepo is obviously also prone to potentially just sliding totally out of control, like a very fast race car, potentially. It's just intriguing for a lot of... I mean, they both talk. They both talk a lot. And I hope Nepo talks and brings a lot of eyes and publicity to this match. And basically the final point that I have to make, and I caused some controversy about this... with this massive explosion of chess, it's currently 2021, so I'm speaking just for 2021. Chess has always had a problem marketing itself to the masses because there's a learning curve, because we're not on TV. And frankly, if you qualify for the World Championship match, and you lose. So Nepo right now is guaranteed 800,000 euros just for qualifying. He might lose and make 800,000 euros. I find that crazy because I feel like at the age of 30 and being in the number 2 position of a sport across the world, we need more than that. And I think that we need to find a way. Chess, top down, top to bottom, broadcasters, sponsors, we need to do better. And we need to get these people paid. I want to see the top guys paid a lot of money. Not just for the candidates, for all of these online tours, for these over-the-board tours. And that's just kind of my food for thought. People are like, well, 800,000 is a lot of money. Guys, some of the athletes who are 30 years old in other sports are making far more than that. And I am happy to pay these people. I am also happy to pay teachers and firefighters. I think teachers are grossly underpaid. I understand that. But I'm just talking about chess. Okay? So that's just my food for thought. Feel free to discuss in the comments. Please keep it civil. Let's not be the stereotypical YouTube comment section where everybody's trying to murder each other. I'm signing off from my candidates coverage. Once again, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. I love making these for you. I love seeing the memes and the dreams in the comment section, and peace and love. I'll see you for the World Championship match.